Hey there, I'm Shannon Ballard, creator and host of Southern Mysteries. This show exists in part because of the incredible support from listeners who love stories like the one you'll hear today. Southern Mysteries is an independent podcast. I research, write, record, and produce each episode myself, and patrons help keep it going. So I always take a moment to say thank you to folks who are supporting the show through Patreon, like Deborah Staples of Three Oaks, Michigan, Lisa Kennemer of Dalton, Georgia, Jennifer Fitzpatrick of Cherryville, North Carolina, Ralph Brewer of Chandler, Arizona, Jeffrey Plunkett of Blackville, South Carolina, Sue Hunter of Franklin, Virginia, and to Tanya Welch, supporting from a mysterious location. Thank you so much for coming on board and becoming patrons of Southern Mysteries. If you want to join these very kind folks in helping me create Southern Mysteries, your support gives you access to the first 3 seasons of the show, which are only available on Patreon. The show sounded very different back then, but folks wanted to hear it, so I've made it available on Patreon. Plus, you get ad-free listening and exclusive stories through my monthly patron podcast, Audacious, where I share some of the most shocking and scandalous crimes in American history. Your support helps cover the real-world cost of creating this show, from research materials to website and hosting expenses. You can join Southern Mysteries on Patreon and start listening right away at patreon.com/Southern Mysteries, or just search Southern Mysteries Podcast in the Patreon app. Now, on to the story. On January 19, 1877, a man and woman stepped off a train in Jefferson, Texas. The man was tall, dressed in fine clothes, with an air of confidence. The woman walked beside him, her head held high. Her diamond earrings, rings, and brooch sparkled in the morning light. They checked into a hotel, saying they had come for a holiday. They mostly kept to themselves, except for a few short walks and one buggy ride that caught attention. The couple rode out to the woods near Big Cypress Bayou. Only one of them returned. When the body of a woman was found weeks later, the discovery shocked the town of Jefferson and set off one of the most talked about murder trials in Texas history. Welcome to Southern Mysteries, exploring Southern history and true crime. I'm your host, Shannon Ballard. This is episode 179, The Mystery of Diamond Bessie. The name Diamond Bessie made headlines across Texas in the late 1870s, but the woman behind the nickname remains a mystery. It's believed her birth name was Annie Stone. Some sources list her as Anna, but she was best known as Bessie Moore. Born sometime in the early 1850s in Watertown, New York, Bessie's early life was marked by hardship. Her mother died when she was still just a young girl. By the age of 15, she ran away and ended up on her own in Cincinnati, Ohio. With no money and few options, she turned to sex work, a path many young women took at the time to survive. We know she worked in Cincinnati, New Orleans, and Chicago. She earned a reputation as a high-class escort, not wealthy, but smart, stylish, and striking. Her jewelry also made her stand out. She wore diamonds, rings, earrings, and a brooch, gifts from clients and admirers. The diamonds became part of who she was. It's what gave her that name that stuck, Diamond Bessie. When Bessie's name was associated with a crime in Texas, newspaper reporters turned Diamond Bessie into a symbol of what they called women of the night. But behind her scandalous job was a young woman trying to survive. In the years leading up to her death, she drifted, moving from city to city, and she remained on the move due to illness and her need to find the right climate for recuperation. There were rumors she had been in an asylum for depression or exhaustion. In early January 1877, Bessie married Abraham Rothschild in Danville, Illinois. He was the son of Meyer Rothschild, a respected and wealthy Cincinnati jeweler. Abe worked for the family business as a traveling salesman. He had money, charm, and connections. But Abe also had a darker reputation. People who knew the couple said Abe drank heavily and had a violent temper. Bessie was seen with bruises and cuts on her face more than once, and several witnesses later reported they had seen Abe strike her. Long before the trip south, the signs that their marriage was troubled and dangerous were there. Their relationship started as transactional, but by the time they married, it seemed Bessie believed in Abe, or at least believed he could offer her a future. They left Danville by train, traveling south on Jay Gould's new Texas and Pacific Railroad. After a short stay at the Capitol Hotel in Marshall, Texas, they arrived in Jefferson in mid-January. They checked into the Brooks House Hotel under the names A. Monroe and wife of St. Louis. And while they tried to keep a low profile, they didn't go unnoticed. Maybe Bessie believed Abe was her way out, her chance at something better. A man with money, a husband with a future. If that's true, what happened next was even more tragic. Because within days of arriving in Jefferson, Bessie Moore would be dead, and Abe Rothschild would be gone. Jefferson was no ordinary town in 1877. It sat along the Big Cypress Bayou, not far from the Louisiana border, and had one of the busiest river ports in the state at the time. Before the railroad shifted the trade routes, steamboats came through daily, bringing money, people, and attention. And Jefferson knew how to entertain them. There were fine hotels, theaters, gambling halls, and more than a few brothels. Respectable folks and shady characters walked the same muddy streets. It was the kind of town where people noticed everything, especially the strangers. When Abe and Bessie arrived in Jefferson, they stood out. Hotel staff and townspeople remembered Abe looked sharp. Bessie was striking, confident, and elegant. But witnesses said the couple argued in their room. Abe continued to drink heavily. Bessie seemed tired, and a few folks noticed bruises on her. The tension was visible, but no one reported anything that seemed criminal. On the morning of January 19th, Abe rented a horse and buggy from a local livery stable. He told the owner they were going for a picnic. Around 11 a.m., the couple left the hotel with a basket and headed toward the woods near Big Cypress Bayou. That evening, Abe returned the buggy, and he was alone. When asked about his wife, he claimed she had gone to visit friends and would return later. But she didn't, and no one ever saw Bessie Moore alive again. In the days that followed, Abe stayed in town, but began acting strangely. As he drank more, he seemed even more nervous, even paranoid. And at least one person later said he was wearing 2 of Bessie's diamond rings. 2 days after the buggy ride, Abe gathered Bessie's belongings and quietly left Jefferson. Bessie had no family in town, so no one reported her missing. But hotel staff noticed she was gone, her things were gone, and the word spread that Abe had disappeared without her. Jefferson Sheriff John Vines opened an investigation. By early February, nearly 3 weeks after Bessie was last seen, he organized a search party. On February 5th, a group of men walking near the bayou found the body of a young woman in a wooded ravine. She was lying face down. Her coat was still buttoned. The diamonds she had worn when she arrived were gone. Bessie had been shot once, behind the left ear. There was no sign of a struggle, and no weapon found. The people of Jefferson didn't know her real name, but they remembered her, the young woman who had walked their streets just weeks earlier, dressed in those diamonds, arm in arm with a charming man who vanished. They gave her the name Diamond Bessie and collected money to give her a proper burial in Oakwood Cemetery. Sheriff Vines kept working the case. He retraced the couple's journey and found they had stopped first in Marshall, where they had checked into the Capitol Hotel under Abe's real name. And that was the key. From there, he sent out inquiries across the country. The police chief of Watertown, New York, recognized the woman from the descriptions offered by Jefferson authorities. Her name, he said, was Annie Stone. She'd also gone by Anna Moore, and some folks knew her as Bessie Moore. Now her name was in the headlines, and the man who left Jefferson alone was wanted for murder. By the time the warrant went out, Abe Rothschild was already back in Cincinnati, and he seemed to be unraveling. Witnesses said Abe was behaving erratically, drinking heavily, and telling friends he was being followed. He seemed paranoid and fearful. Just days after news of Bessie's murder reached Cincinnati, Abe turned a pistol on himself. The bullet didn't kill him, but it destroyed his right eye. While Abe was recovering in a hospital, the pieces began to come together for Sheriff John Vines, who had traced the couple's movements to Marshall, confirmed Bessie and Abe's real names, and sent word to law enforcement across state lines. Abe Rothschild was arrested in Cincinnati and extradited to Texas. Abe's trial began in Jefferson in 1878. The courtroom was packed with reporters from Dallas, Houston, even New Orleans. Locals lined up outside to hear news from inside. Some of the most prominent lawyers in Texas took part in the case as Abe's defense counsel. David B. Culberson, a respected attorney and future U.S. congressman, along with his son, Charles Culberson, who would go on to become governor of Texas and a U.S. senator. The courtroom was as much a political arena as it was a legal one. The prosecution laid out a clear timeline. Abe and Bessie arrived in Jefferson under assumed names. They were seen together around the hotel. Witnesses heard arguments. The couple left for a picnic, and only one of them came back alive. Abe's experienced, expensive defense team knew how to exploit the gaps in the state's case. The defense didn't deny Abe had been there, but they pushed doubt. No murder weapon was found. There were no eyewitnesses to the crime. And his lawyers portrayed Abe as emotionally unstable, a man with a troubled mind, not a cold-blooded killer. They shaped a different narrative, that Bessie had enemies and Abe had nothing to gain from her death. Someone else must have followed them or met Bessie after Abe returned to town. But the jury wasn't swayed. Abe Rothschild was found guilty of murder and sentenced to hang. But the case wasn't over. Abe's defense appealed the verdict. They claimed the trial had been unfair, pointing to procedural errors, the judge's handling of key testimony, and the question of Abe's mental state. The Texas Court of Appeals agreed, and Abe's conviction was overturned. A new trial was ordered, this time in Marshall, Texas. A change of venue meant a new jury, a new judge, and a new tone. By the time the second trial began in 1880, more than 3 years had passed since Bessie's murder. Some witnesses were gone. Others couldn't remember details as clearly as they had in 1878. And the defense had a stronger case. They painted Bessie as unstable, suggested her lifestyle put her at risk, and leaned on the missing jewelry to argue this must have been a robbery by someone else. The prosecution couldn't place the gun in Abe's hand. And even though he fled and seemed to have spiraled when he returned to Cincinnati, the defense told the jury that wasn't guilt. It was fear. Fear of being falsely accused. And the jury agreed. Abe Rothschild was acquitted, walked away a free man. But freedom didn't erase the questions or the bitterness. For the people of Jefferson, it felt like justice had been served and then taken away for a young woman who had arrived in their town full of life and tragically ended up dead near the bayou. The man who brought her there, the man who rode with her into the woods and returned alone, was allowed to move on. But Jefferson never let go of Bessie Moore. Her story spread, and with it, so did the nickname. Eventually, the town raised enough money to place a grave marker that read, Diamond Bessie, and she became part of local lore. Even after all the court testimony, the newspaper coverage, the speculation around the case, one thing was never settled. What really happened to Diamond Bessie? In the years after the trial, strange stories started to circulate. Some claimed to have seen a young woman matching Bessie's description, alive, in cities far from Jefferson. One rumor suggested Bessie faked her death to escape the life she was in, that one of her admirers had helped place the body of another woman near the bayou, and the woman in the grave in Jefferson wasn't Bessie at all. But no one could prove that, and most historians believe the body found in the woods was without question Bessie Moore. The people who met her weeks before her death had been asked to identify her, and they confirmed it was Bessie. Her clothing and jewelry matched her descriptions, and there was no serious effort to challenge that fact during Abe Rothschild's trials. But the fact that the question lingered, what if she never died at all, says something about the uncertainty that surrounded Bessie Moore's life. She had used more than one name. Her background was murky, and her movements before Jefferson were hard to trace. She was a woman people noticed, but few people truly knew her. That made it easy for those rumors and theories to take root. And it spoke to something deeper, a kind of wishful thinking. Maybe this young woman hadn't been murdered. Maybe she had found a way to start over. Perhaps disappeared on purpose to escape a violent relationship. That idea was easier to believe than the fact that she died alone, in the woods, and there was never justice for her. There was no one to tell her story the way she might have told it. No one to say who she was before those beautiful diamonds or the grave. That silence meant others spoke for her, and in doing so, created the legend of Diamond Bessie, a symbol of mystery and scandal. And for more than a century, the truth of what happened to her has been shaped by speculation. But behind the myth, she was a young woman who left home too early and lived in a world that offered women like her few chances. She worked and survived the only way she knew how, and ultimately trusted the wrong man. When you strip away the drama of the trials and the theories about switched bodies, what remains is a woman who was vulnerable. And that truth still resonates in the stories of many other women, then and now. Women on the margins, women who go missing, who aren't believed, or who are remembered more for how they died than how they lived. In 1955, Jefferson decided to make Bessie's story part of the town's public memory. That year, the first Diamond Bessie murder trial reenactment was staged, a theatrical retelling of the trial held in the Jefferson Playhouse. It became an annual tradition, drawing visitors from across the region, a tradition that continues to this day. She came to Jefferson as someone forgotten by the world, but in the end, the town gave Diamond Bessie the grace of being remembered, not for how she died, but for who she was. Southern Mysteries is created and hosted by me, Shannon Ballard. You can find sources for this episode in the show notes in the player where you're listening or at southernmysteries.com. If you enjoyed this story, make sure you're following Southern Mysteries wherever you listen so you never miss a new episode. And if you have a moment, rate or review the show because it really helps other history and true crime fans discover it. And if you'd like to hear more Southern Mysteries, consider becoming a patron. Members of the Southern Mysteries Patreon get access to exclusive content, including the full archive of the first 3 seasons, patron-only episodes, and my monthly patron podcast, Audacious. You can learn more and start listening today at patreon.com/Southern Mysteries. As always, thank you so much for listening to Southern Mysteries.